Welcome to the Real People, Real Business Show. My name is Stephanie Hayes, and I'm a business strategist who loves to speak with like-minded entrepreneurs to share their real stories and the gritty details on building their businesses. On this show, you won't hear about the glamorized entrepreneurship journeys that you see online. You won't be told how to make six figures in 6 weeks. Instead, you can expect to hear real, vulnerable, and inspiring stories you can relate to that have helped create the foundation of each of our guests' businesses. Goodbye, boss babes. Hello, real-life entrepreneurs. Today, I'm so excited to welcome Ken Babcock. Ken is the co-founder and CEO of Tango, which allows users to create beautiful step-by-step tutorials of any digital process without the performance art of video recordings. Ken, along with his co-founders Brian Schultz and Dan Giovacchini, dropped out of Harvard Business School during the pandemic to start the company. Since then, the company has grown to nearly 50,000 users and 20 full-time team members. Welcome to the show, Ken, and thanks so much for taking the time to share your story today.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, and a quick update. We're now 35 people and 200,000 users. So
wow.
Yeah, things have really escalated, I think, since we first got in touch.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what your bio said, but I think that's an amazing place for us to start the conversation. So clearly, in a short period of time, you have grown this business. You have experienced growth that a lot of people might be really excited to hear about. So tell me the story. How did you end up digital process management, digital process recordings? Tell me the story.
Yeah, so when my co-founders, Brian, Dan, and I, we were at Harvard Business School. We had been introduced through mutual friends, got along great as friends, and quickly realized that we were all there to do something entrepreneurial, whether start a company, join an early stage company. The thing we kept coming back to, or the ideas that we enjoyed talking about, all related to team performance and what makes teams tick, what makes teams high performing. Because I think we've all had the experience of a team is not just the sum of its parts, right? There's something intangible there. And so, what we honed in on was really, within a team, you've got these high performers, and the ability for a high performer to share and scale their knowledge to the rest of the team, that really creates a high performing team. And so the more we spent with that, I wouldn't even call it problem, but just opportunity that every team has, the more we realized that the problem, lied with documentation. People dread documentation. In fact, when I say the word, most people kind of wince. But it takes too long to create. Once you do it, it gets outdated pretty quickly. And then once it's outdated, people start pinging you with questions, and you become almost like a support manager for that piece of documentation you created. So for us, we said, what if we could lower the barrier to creating documentation? What if we could remove that dread? And that was something that we all got really excited about. We had seen it in our prior careers before heading to school, where the teams that excelled the most are the ones that are able to say, hey, here's what we know, and how do we scale that to the rest of the company? And so that was really the start of Tango, is we wanted to basically make documentation a passive process, turn it into something that just by executing in your role, you were inherently creating documentation. So that was our start.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's huge demand for that too. I do a lot of corporate consulting, and I can tell you that is one of the roadblocks that a lot of these, even the high performing teams have, is extracting and recognizing that the knowledge exists inside of the heads of these people, and what happens if they lose them. And that happens, right?
Yeah, and I think, what happens also with process is at the high, at the leadership levels, a lot of leaders will assume, oh, our company runs on 40 core processes. When you start talking to frontline workers, the people that are actually executing on that process, we've seen that number be 30, 40x what leaders know to be true. And so there's just this lack of visibility. And then, when you ask those frontline workers, how much of your process is documented? We actually did this in a webinar. A majority of those people said that, 25 to 50% of our process is documented. That becomes really challenging when you have people leaving, maybe you have layoffs, you have new hires. How are they supposed to know what those 1,200 processes might be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, as somebody who used to be a business process consultant, I have been on the front lines too, and I have seen that the devil is in the details, right? And it's you can commit to your 40 processes throughout the organization, but those frontline workers are executing in a very detailed way. And when those details aren't clear, that's where we end up with the breakdown, right? So whatever your strategy is, doesn't matter if the execution continues to be fragmented and decentralized, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I think there's a piece in there where those processes also evolve,
Yeah.
and the improvisation that frontline workers often have to create and they encounter daily. That means that your processes need to adapt. There's, I mentioned it kind of at the beginning, but everyone talks about, oh yeah, the documentation we have, like we have some of it, but a lot of it's stale.
Yeah.
And that's a real problem that we're trying to address too.
So tell me a little bit more about how you've addressed this, partially because I'm being self-serving now because I want to know. but I mean, what you've got is a great story around really understanding the problem area and trying to develop something accessible that's going to solve it. So tell me a little bit more about how that actually happens.
Yeah, so I'll get very tactical about what our product does. So we are a Chrome extension as well as a desktop application that allows you to basically turn it on, press play, press capture, walk through your process on any web page, any tool, and we capture the actions, the clicks, types, text, copy, paste, of everything that you do. Once you're done with that process, you hit end capture, and then what we spit out is a step-by-step tutorial automatically of screenshots, descriptions, URLs of everything that you just did. And we give you a canvas to edit it as well. Maybe you picked up an extra click, maybe you didn't mean to do that one thing. And then, what you have at your fingertips is the documentation that would usually take you hours, all the screenshots, all the editing, all the compiling of links. We give that to you in a matter of seconds.
And who's the ideal client?
So we've seen a ton of adoption from customer support teams, IT teams, teams with training in their titles, basically anyone that needs to teach a lot of people how to use software within their organization. Support teams tend to be a great one because they're large teams. They're typically, defining escalation paths, reactive to tickets that are coming in, helping users get over, an issue that they're experiencing. And Tango really becomes a sidekick for them, which is pretty powerful. So that internal and external training use case, if that's core to the role, then Tango usually ends up being a great fit.
Do you think it would be a good fit for, I'm thinking about even like solo entrepreneurs who hire their first team member and hire virtual assistants, and they're always confounded by how they document, and they feel like they need to create a whole bunch of stuff before they can even hire their first team member, which leaves them at a point of not being able to grow.
Yeah, and I'll generalize that even at a higher level, like any new hire onboarding, right? I think there's there's so many processes that need to be documented, especially when you're hiring for your first person in a role or in a function, and you're saying, okay, I used to do this all the time, and here's what I did. Now I'm expecting you to kind of take that, run with it, build on top of it. The first step is writing it down. And so, whether you're a solopreneur, whether you're a team leader, I think onboarding new hires is a core use case.
So what prevents, I mean, there's this gap, right, where we have all these undocumented processes that are happening, 75% of them are undocumented. So why?
At the individual level, it's a little bit of, I don't see the ROI, or maybe I have to do this kind of on extra time. I've got a core job that I need to fulfill, but then when it comes to documenting what that core job is, I need to do that after hours. And again, the staleness piece, like businesses change rapidly, processes change rapidly. For people to create something that's going to go out of date quickly, they tend to, they tend to not see the ROI there. I think another piece that, is less focused on the individual and more about the team, which articulates a little bit of like the movement and the vision that we have. Scaling your knowledge, having impact through others typically isn't included in a performance review, right? Mm-hmm. Your ability to execute and your ability to amass knowledge is typically what is tied to that. And so, for us, what we're trying to say is that, achieving scale through the processes that you've defined, the knowledge that you've accumulated, making sure others can replicate that and follow your lead, that should be sort of what defines performance within an organization. So there's a few factors at play there, and I think it's really part of what we're doing beyond just Tango, the Chrome extension. What we're really trying to say is that, documentation, that's the leading indicator of operational excellence. Every team leader wants to be operationally excellent. And the first step is, what are we doing today and how can we adjust that?
Yeah. So let me back up. You dropped out of Harvard, which a lot of people don't do. And that's part of your origin story, right? So tell me a little bit more about that. What did that mean to you?
Sure. So, I mean, it is absolutely part of the origin story. I think when we were working on Tango, it almost became a no-brainer, though. We were at Harvard for graduate school, so the three of us had already, we had undergraduate degrees, we had, prior careers before going to business school. And the ultimate goal for us in going to business school was to either start a company, find some co-founders, or join an early stage company. And when that opportunity presented itself, it was a little bit like, we kind of got what we were looking for, so let's go for it.
Yeah.
And then, the other piece as well is that, entrepreneurship and, business opportunity is so much about timing. The onset of the pandemic, which happened during our first year at HBS, and that's right around when we were thinking about Tango, it really accelerated a lot of our thinking, and accelerated a lot of our customers' thinking too, because what had happened was these gaps around documentation, these gaps around operational excellence had gotten exposed. All these teams went remote, distributed, and suddenly team leaders realized, oh my gosh, like we don't even really know what it takes to execute in this role. And so that for us turned into a call to action to say, we should probably go build this because the market needs it and customers need it. The level of urgency around the conversations we were having was palpable. And so, when you see that type of opportunity, you're gonna take risks and you're gonna make decisions that maybe at the outset look like, oh, I don't know if I would drop out of Harvard, but it was the right time.
Yeah. And you had partners, and did those partners fulfill all the roles that you needed? Were you bootstrapping, but you went for money at some point in time, didn't you?
We did. So, so it was a founding team of the three of us. We're obviously a software company. And so, what you often need in software is a great team of engineers. And so we went out to raise our seed round of funding pretty shortly after we dropped out. I think it was the fall of 2020. Basically saying, hey, you know what? Here are the skill sets that we need in an engineering team to be able to take this prototype and bring a real product to market. And so, that's what kind of got us started on the venture-backed sort of growth startup path.
Yeah. And was that, how far in was that?
4 months, 5 months.
Oh, okay. So
pretty,
you guys
pretty early. We had a working prototype that we could bring together in pitch decks. But what was really fascinating, what excited investors the most was all those conversations that we were having with customers and that urgency that we felt. We were able to put them in touch with investors and say, hey, you should talk to these people. They're thinking about investing in us. Articulate the problems you're experiencing and how Tango would solve that if we're able to build it. And so, really it was those customers that allowed us to secure our initial funding for the business.
Mm-hmm. And then how long ago was that?
So fall of 2020, it's a little over 2 years now. Since then, we also raised a Series A funding in April of this past year. So, that allowed us to continue to grow the team. Like I said, 35 people today, remote, fully distributed, and gives us enough capital to kind of go into a lot of market uncertainty that people are projecting in 2023.
Yeah. And I mean, who knows how much validity there is to that, if it's hype, if it's, and so that's a really good question. So you've endured for, 3 years-ish. And what do you think has been sort of the driving force? What's kept you kind of going? Because this can be a hard journey, right? Especially when you introduce capital into your business, then the ownership structure changes and who you're accountable to changes. And so tell me a little bit more about what's kind of driving you forward.
The biggest thing, and this makes it easier to manage a lot of those stakeholders, is if you're able to truly prioritize the customer. I think what we've been able to build, which, at this point is truly become like an award-winning product, is because of our, focus on the customer. And so when you talk to investors, when you talk to advisors, when you talk to the team about why are we going this direction versus another, like what is it that we're focused on? If it all comes back to the customer and the customer can clearly articulate the value that they're receiving from the product, where they want to see the product go, what other jobs to be done they have, it kind of cuts out a lot of the noise. Because you're right, when you introduce more capital, you introduce more stakeholders. They have their own priorities, they have things that they care about. But if you can kind of continue to beat this drum of, we listen to the customer, we prioritize the customer, and that's why we're doing what we're doing, it tends to cut out the noise.
So to be completely self-serving, I want to talk to you about innovation strategy, because that is one of my areas of focus. And so tell me a little bit about how you're harnessing that customer feedback and the customer needs back into the business. What's the innovation cycle look like? How are you managing that?
Yeah, so I think there's kind of two components to keeping that sort of loop with the customer. There's quantitative feedback as well as qualitative feedback. And so, my prior experience before business school, I was a data scientist at Uber for a little over 4 years and had a few other experiences along the way. And so my background is in a lot of that quantitative analysis. And I think by being at Uber, which was a best-in-class data organization, I was able to understand how, data can serve as that like leading trigger or leading hypothesis that then drives a lot of the questioning and a lot of the understanding that you need to get from customers. And so we kind of have a recurring cadence of data within Tango where, we have obviously like high-level KPIs, other business metrics, but the team is also, encouraged to explore hypotheses that they have. And then that dictates, oh, hey, we're seeing this type of behavior in the data. Let's go talk to a set of customers that fit that, sort of behavioral demographic and understand why they're doing what it is that they're doing. Why are they engaging with this feature in this way, which may be unexpected or maybe totally what we intended, right? So I think you need the marriage between that qualitative and quantitative. One can't speak louder than the other. And, that really allows us to make sure that we're not just seeing the behavior at scale, but we're also understanding why it is what they're doing. So that really drives a lot of our our innovation.
The data.
Mm-hmm.
And who's interpreting the data? Like, do you have an actual team of individuals whose job it is to watch? That's you.
That's me,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to remove, some of that dependency. Obviously, as the CEO, I've got a lot of
Yeah.
things going
Yeah.
on, but no, I think we've brought on more people who are, dangerous with data, which is good. But a lot of our like planning process, it involves kind of big rocks, KPIs, different priorities, and so the team is very like data minded.
Mhm.
But in terms of deeper dive analyses, that historically has been me to date, but I'm excited for a few other folks that we're bringing on.
And would you say that the original partners and who I'm assuming are in leadership capacity now, did you all bring to the table, complementary skill sets, or were there real big gaps that you needed to fill?
I mean, there will always be gaps. But I would say, yeah, we were very complementary. So Brian, my co-founder, engineering background, very comfortably slotted into the CTO role, which we needed, obviously, as a software company. Dan, my other co-founder, had been an investor and really knew sort of the financial ins and outs, and also just like some of these different like monetization models and strategies from a lot of the companies that he invested in, particularly on the go-to-market side. So he slotted in nicely there, and then for me, I had some experience with, obviously at high growth companies, leading teams, also, fundraising. And so all those experiences kind of fit well with the CEO role. So we were extremely complementary, but I think, the biggest thing, you can look for kind of complementary skill sets in co-founders. I mean, that's pretty easy to look at in a resume, but, the intangible piece just of how we worked together, I felt like there was a sort of an undertone of, what, we're going to have healthy discussions, healthy debates, but ultimately what we decide as a group, even if we disagree, even if one of us disagrees, it's a culture of sort of disagree and commit.
Yeah.
And so that I think has really allowed us to be successful. The complementary nature, like, obviously has helped, but the way we make decisions and process information has probably been the biggest benefit.
Yeah, absolutely critical, right? You've seen so many examples of the companies where, the partners get together on a whim and it falls apart because there's just a lack of value structure or communication skills or whatever it might be. And those, my partners and I have been together for 20 years. And just because we had so much background together, when we built a software company, it was just like sliding right in, and we just communicate well, and that's been incredibly important. They happen to be really good technical resources too, so that helps. But I think that gelling of the leadership team is extremely important.
I mean, we talk about it like we probably spend more time with each other than we do anybody else in our lives, right? I mean, it's sort of when you phrase it like that, it's kind of a grim reality, but that is the nature of a founding relationship.
Yep.
You need to be able to have like the hardest of hard conversations. You need to be motivating each other, reinforcing, what you want the company to stand for. The other piece too is that like people rarely give the founding team feedback on your team. You guys are assumed to have the most context or the strategy and the vision for the company. And so there's not a lot of upward feedback. So you also need to be that sounding board for your founding team where you say, hey man, like, here's some things I think we could like work on together and improve. And that journey has been incredibly rewarding. I think we all embrace kind of that like growth mindset, the idea that we can continue to get better. And so that's another piece too. Like if you can't give your co-founder honest feedback, it's going to be a long, or maybe maybe very short journey.
Yeah. And I think also the commitment to a growth plan, like an intentional growth plan amongst yourselves, is critical to, the health of that leadership team.
Sure.
Yeah. So let's switch tacks a little bit. So you have a software company, and a software company can grow through a number of different models. So tell me a little bit about what growth has meant to you and what's worked best for you.
Yeah, and this is an area that we spent a lot of time early on thinking about. As we were getting excited about the idea, as we understood the market opportunity, the inherent benefit that our product has to a growth model is that, documentation is usually a one-to-many relationship, meaning there's someone who creates documentation, and then there are usually a lot of people that consume that documentation, that knowledge. Because of that, that's a natural viral loop to get the product in front of more people. And so what we focused on early in our product development was, how do we continue to accelerate that one-to-many relationship? How do we make it as easy as possible for the creator of documentation to share a Tango? Because they're sharing it so someone else can learn it, someone else can get up to speed, and we need that person to know that this was created with Tango. And so to date, 40% of our growth has come from word of mouth and that viral loop, which is not just something that's exciting about the spread, referral, testimonial nature of the business, but it's also incredibly low cost. So
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people might spend on paid marketing, ads, we've benefited tremendously from our users doing a lot of that work for us. So that has been amazing, just an amazing sort of viral growth strategy. I would say the other piece that we really emphasized was being product led. And what that means, any creator of product is going to say, well, like we're product led. We need to win on the product. But for us, really what that meant was being bottoms up and driving adoption sort of from those frontline creators of documentation. The opposite would be being sales led, going to team leaders, selling them on a solution, and then it sort of comes top down to the rest of the team. What we said was, let's focus on the people that are feeling this pain point acutely, because it's going to make our marketing more compelling. It's going to allow us to continue to build the product for those people. And we can make everything self-serve. So those strategies in tandem have been really powerful, because that viral loop also benefits from the fact that anyone can see and experience Tango and sign up, in a matter of seconds.
So do you employ a sales team? Is there a sales strategy, a direct sales strategy, or are you kind of hitting it from both sides?
So we have one salesperson. He's great. But the other benefit of being product led is, we've got over 200,000 users today. And, Colby, our sales guy, can kind of look at that pipeline of users and their level of engagement, whether they've upgraded to our pro plan, which is also self-serve. And he can say, oh, these would be really interesting enterprise customers. Let me reach out and see if there's a fit. And so a lot of his work to date and a lot of the deals that he's signed has come from people finding us, downloading the product, using it, and then having a conversation with Colby. And so, I think one of the benefits of being product led is that you also don't necessarily need to invest super heavily in sales. I mean, we're lucky in the sense that we have a great salesperson who's able to kind of manage that pipeline and handle what is ultimately a lot of inbound leads. So we're hitting it from both sides, but I would say, the core focus is still on that top of funnel user growth.
And how are those guys finding you? I mean, is that traditional, content, or are you showing up in different communities?
So, people may laugh at this, but TikTok has been incredible for us. So the viral loop is, 40%, like we said, but, there's obviously the question of when that first person finds Tango, how do they find it?
Yeah.
TikTok has been amazing. Our product sort of showcases really well via short form video. Really easy to demo Tango and get a sense for what it's about. And then I would say the other thing too is that, we have really like raving fans who are users. And so, anytime you can lead into user generated content, testimonials, that's usually the best proof point for your product, as opposed to, what you might be telling a prospective customer. And so TikTok, as well as some other channels that we're still ramping up on, have been really great to get that first user.
I got it. TikTok gets a bad rap in sort of traditional business circles. Maybe I'm hoping that's changing now. I'm 47, right? So I'm not the TikTok generation, but I will spend a considerable amount of time on there because there are some incredibly talented people, and the business use case is getting super interesting. So that really consumable bite-sized content, if the product lends itself to that kind of consumption, I would be leveraging that like 100%. Do you have to do any dances?
It's funny. I don't, thankfully, but the people that we work with are, like you said, phenomenal. It's a unique skill set, to be able to communicate a message so clearly. I think where our product also lends itself to that is like users reach our aha moment really, really quickly. That's really important in a product-led business. Like if you can get to that point where you're like, holy cow, I see the value of this product. If you can get to that in a matter of minutes, I think right now, or maybe, most recently when we measured this, it was 4.8 minutes for a user from the point where they create an account to they make their first Tango. And so that for us, that's the aha moment. So if people can get there really quickly, they see the value, they become recurring users. That translates to that short form too. If people can demo the product and show the value really quickly, that's a really viable channel.
What a great test as well, right? If you can make a TikTok video and it's effective in under 5 minutes, then I think that proves you've got viability inside of the product and the use case, right?
I think so.
I love it. So what's in the future for Tango? What's in the future for you guys?
Yeah, I think for us, it's continuing to build for those creators of documentation. We've got, a lot of exciting things that we want to deploy in the next year. Part of that, not just for creators, but also for viewers. So if you think about, traditionally today, going into your internal wiki, finding a relevant piece of documentation, trying to follow along, you're usually kind of splitting your screen, going through the process, and then following on one side. What we want to really do is actually drive that Tango that someone's created real time onto your screen to actually walk you through the steps. So imagine, a cursor or a highlight field that actually shows you, hey, to execute on this task, here's where you go. And so, that'll continue to build for the viewer, but also give the right feedback back to the creator. Like, hey, someone was able to do this in 10 minutes because of the workflow that you created on Tango. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we've got planned in the hopper. And, I think the big vision for us is, how do we make documentation something that is adaptable to the rate of change of a business, is adaptable to anyone who's consuming it, anyone who's creating it. That dynamic nature, I think, is really where existing solutions fall flat, because usually when it's created, it stays static for a while and then it's out of date.
Yeah, and I think there's also a tendency to think that whatever we produce has to be like high production value and, formatted in a certain way and all of that. And if we can, it's kind of like with content creation these days, that the more kind of authentic it is, the more believable and the more useful it is. So we're moving away from this need for, for that, what I think is a big barrier to people getting started.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we've embraced that in our product development too. I mean, we try to remove as much formatting need as possible.
Yeah.
And a lot of the feedback we get is, people are like, oh, I love the look and feel of a Tango. Like it's a lot more desirable to share.
I think about the frontline workers. I worked at a utility doing, some process improvement and integration work. And I think about these folks who were sitting there in their trucks, and those were the keepers of the knowledge. They knew the process, and getting them to the office to sit down and document processes was, forget it, right? They were being measured on, how quickly they could do service calls, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So super interesting opportunity, yeah. I think. I have one question just before we wrap up that I ask all of my guests, and I'd love to hear your perspective on it, especially given that you dropped out of Harvard. What's the difference? And I actually totally get it. Yeah. What's the difference between what we hear out there in the business world, in business school, and in the online business world, and what's real about running a business?
It's a good question. I love the classroom environment at HBS because it was all case study based, all grounded in reality. And you needed to have kind of like a healthy discussion on a path forward. What was this business going to do? At this point in time, they were facing some dilemma, and you needed to kind of, lay the course for what they were going to do next. Really engaging form of learning. I think where that's like pretty disconnected from building a business is that those points in time, those decisions are happening multiple times a day.
Oh, yeah.
There's not just this like, all right, let's take the temperature, let's get all the resources together, let's package it into a case study, and let's decide what we're going to do. It's like, okay, well, I'm facing a decision now, and this decision needs to be made in an hour. And then like an hour later, there's a new decision that comes up and I need to react in real time. And then there's some things I can take more time with and think about. But, it's not as, you don't have as full of a picture as you might in a case study that has exhibits and appendixes, and you can leverage all these different resources to come up with an analysis. A lot of times you need to, in a real business, you need to kind of go with your gut, and hopefully your gut is informed by being prepared and being thoughtful and having the insights that you need. But you don't have these moments in time to turn your business into a case
Let
study.
me just go write a case study. Yeah. I mean, I have a master's degree in business as well. And I like the amount of HBR case studies that or Harvard Business School case studies that we had to do were just, amazing. And there's a usefulness to them for sure. But when you get into entrepreneurship and you start going, it's a tidal wave, and you never stop making decisions. And I think that that's one of the things I wish people knew, is that you're never arriving, right? You're never arriving at this place you thought you'd get to. By the time you get there, you're already looking at something else. And so a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, struggle with this, where they think that they should have reached a milestone and they've failed because they haven't. But once you accept that entrepreneurship is just a flow, and it's a flow of decisions, it's a flow of circumstances, it becomes a little bit more comfortable. Not a lot, but a little bit. All right.
It's a really good way to frame it.
Yeah. And I think I wish more people knew that and knew that going in. We're coming up on time. I want to thank you a lot for taking the time to chat with me today. And of course, I've got Tango up on my screen right now, because I know I'm going to have to go and check it out for my own clients. But can you tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yes. So the easiest way, just go to tango.us. That's our website. And if you want to reach out directly to me, talk a little bit more about some of the things we talked about on this show, feel free to reach out directly at Ken, Ken, at tango.us.
Awesome. We'll put all of those links in the show notes, and we will send people off to become new raving fans of Tango. Awesome. Okay, and that's a wrap. I'm so happy we had the opportunity to chat with Ken today to hear more about how his business came to be, his experiences along the way, and what the future of the business entails. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Real People, Real Business Show, where we can get the real entrepreneurial stories and journeys that you can relate to. The show notes, resources, and links from this episode are available on our website and social media platforms. Thanks again for joining us today. If you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to leave us a review on whatever platform you're on to help us share these genuine stories with an even bigger audience. Until next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.